The biggest methane gas leak in state history is creating a human and environmental disaster in LA County. A federal judge says video of a police officer's fatal shooting of an unarmed man in the Midway district must be released to the public. And former members of the city's police review board say it's a failure hamstrung by City Hall politics and conflicts of interest. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, a reporter Ingrid Lobit of iNewsSource. Hi, Ingrid.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here. Investigative producer J.W. August of NBC7 San Diego. Hi, J.W.
Hi, Mark.
Good to have you back again. And reporter Liam Dillon of Voice of San Diego. Hi, Liam.
Hi, Mark.
Good to have you here today. Well, an environmental disaster is playing out in slow motion in a community north of Los Angeles. Since October 23rd, methane, or natural gas, has been spewing from a leak underground. It's the biggest gas leak in California history, and the company responsible is owned by San Diego energy giant Sempra. Nothing the company has done so far has fixed the leak. Well, Ingrid, tell us where this is happening and how many people are affected by this disaster.
Well, this is happening in the Aliso Canyon gas storage facility, which is just over the hills from some communities in the northern San Fernando Valley that people may have heard of: Porter Ranch, Granada Hills, and Chatsworth.
And then Simi Valley, that's up in that area?
Yep, and that's just a little bit more to the west. That's
okay,
right.
All right. And I think that's home to the Reagan Library if anybody's been up there.
Correct.
So all north of the city up there. Okay. So it hasn't gotten much publicity because it's the worst, as I said in the open, the worst leak in state history.
Well, the local television stations and the LA Times definitely have been reporting on it. But yeah, it seems that there's not as much as it might deserve for being as large a release as it is, about 80,000 pounds of methane per hour, which makes it dwarf the largest source of methane, or natural gas. This is the same gas we use in our stoves and our heating systems. The largest emitter of methane in San Diego County is the Miramar landfill, and this broken well is currently giving off 33 times as much as that landfill.
Wow. I mean, and so methane, and we can get to some details on this, is a nasty stuff. I mean, it's worse than the emissions that come out of your tailpipe, right?
Yeah, it's not a traditional pollutant, so it's not considered toxic, but it's a very bad climate pollutant. It's about 86 times more powerful in changing the climate as carbon dioxide, which we hear a lot more about. So there's a very high priority on reducing methane all across our economy, and this release really cancels out, it's very unfortunate, a lot of efforts to reduce those methane climate emissions.
Right. Now, what kind of well is this? It's not actually a natural gas well itself that's producing natural gas, right? It's a storage area?
That's right. They're not taking gas. Well, it was originally an oil well, drilled originally as an oil well, and then converted when the oil field became depleted. This is a sandstone formation in Los Angeles County, and when we played out the oil that was in it, it's now used as a gas storage facility where Southern California Gas injects gas underground during the time when it's collecting it, when we're not really using it, and then when we all crank up our air conditioners or crank up our heating, really, better said, in the wintertime, then they start really pumping out the field.
Have you been there? What's it like?
I've been to the community, which is about 3/4 of a mile south. You can smell natural gas in the air. It's an area where the wind really moves stuff around. You're not sitting in a bowl, so you smell it and then it goes away, and then you smell it and then it goes away.
Has everybody abandoned the place? Are they all, the residents left, or what's the deal with that?
No, it's not quite like that. A number of people have left. About 2,800 residents are seeking relocation. Most recent news, just yesterday, they've decided that the kids in the 2 elementary schools there are not going to complete their school year in their schools. They're going to be moved to 2 other schools. Los Angeles Unified just made that decision.
Can it blow up? I mean, that thing you wrote in your excellent article about the airplanes flying overhead and they're warning airplanes.
Get them out of the area.
Yeah, what's that about? Are they worried that the thing goes off?
There is a concern about ignition, but it's not like it can just ignite at any point. There's a narrow band of circumstances in which the gas can ignite. And I know there is certain equipment Southern California Gas said that they can't run when the wind is blowing certain ways. but it's not like it could just blow at any second.
What if there were, a major building fire or house fire in that area? Would that is this a concern for them? I mean, firefighters and rescuers, you wonder if they could even get in at that.
I don't know the answer to that. That's an excellent question, and we are going to be doing a lot more reporting on this to find out exactly under what conditions there could be ignition.
Okay.
So why can't they stop it?
They've tried a lot of the traditional ways that you try to kill an out-of-control well by forcing brine or something heavy down to increase the pressure so the gas doesn't want to come up, and that's just failed. So now they've called in these expert well killers that worked on the Kuwaiti oil field fires, and they're having to drill a relief well to intercept the well that is broken and reroute the gas out of that.
Like the Gulf, doesn't it? All over again,
It
the Gulf.
does have some similarities.
Yeah. Now, how far underground is this? There's been different reports. One that's very deep, a mile, and then it's thought to be maybe not so deep now. Do they really know?
Well, according to the Oil and Gas Division of the state of California, they do know. That yesterday they told me that, so the formation where the gas is about 8,700 feet deep, but the Oil and Gas Division told me that the rupture in the steel casing of this bad well is only about 500 feet deep, I believe. Yeah, 480 to 500 feet deep.
Okay.
So
much
shallow.
nearer the surface. You would think that would aid them than something that was a mile or more deep, right?
Except that I think now it's seeping out through the ground, up through the ground. It's no longer inside its casing.
Wow.
And I was the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. report about the agency being a sock puppet. When I read your quote from Benson, the head of the state agency, that hey, we don't want to get too involved in this because we really don't want to have to take liability. And I'm thinking, what does a state agency do that does oversight if not get involved in something like this? That sounded like pooey.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more to look into there exactly as far as who can do what on the site. But it sounds like Southern California Gas is the one that's in charge.
All right, JW brought up the issue of folks evacuating. We do have a bite from a resident. This is Susan Gorman Chang from Porter Ranch in that area. Let's hear what she has to say.
Gosh, are we in one of those sci-fi movies where you run from your car to your home and you can never go outside and you can't exercise outside or walk your pets because the air's become toxic? How is that okay? I don't think that's okay. I mean, that may be a temporary solution, but it's frightening that we've come to that.
Now, folks like that who've been relocated, what's their life like now? Where are they?
Well, and the reason they were relocated is because there have been quite a few reports of nosebleeds, headaches, nausea. Some people's pets have had nosebleeds, they report. What is their situation? They're living in corporate housing or extended stay hotels. They're booked through March or April. They're having to take their kids to school through an entirely different route. They're not entirely always able to cook. It's definitely a major life disruption for a lot of them.
And what about long-term? We've got long-term effects on the folks who've been exposed to it. You've got just the gas itself in the air. It doesn't last as long as CO2, but as you said earlier, it's more of an impact on greenhouse effect, right?
As far as down here at ground level, it dissipates quickly, and as far as long-term effects, those would be long-term effects from very low-level exposure, and many of the people who have left really feel that has not been adequately investigated medically. As far as the atmosphere, the methane is going to be affecting the atmosphere for the next 20 years and in a powerful way before it starts to break down.
Now, Jada?
Well, as a ratepayer, SDG&E, has it gone long enough till you can figure out how much money this may end up costing everybody here?
The only estimate I have heard is from the attorneys who have filed the class action, so I don't know how reputable a number that would be. They're talking about $1 billion, but you can think about a community of 40,000 people, relatively high-end homes. They're being relocated for months. There are some health issues. It seems like potentially it might not be a small number.
All right, and the company itself, which as we're noting is owned by Sempra, the San Diego energy company, what are they saying about all this? What's their reaction?
They say they take it extremely seriously. They say it has their full attention. It says they have never had anything like this happen before. It's by far the biggest leak that they have ever had. They're completely focused on drilling this relief well and stopping the release as soon as possible. They've set up community centers, and they are paying for the relocation of people, putting out information for the community every day.
Okay. Well, we'll be looking forward to your further reporting on this fascinating story. We're going to move on. Several San Diego news organizations celebrated a First Amendment victory this week when a federal judge ordered a video of a controversial police shooting released to the public. But that order was delayed for a week to allow for a possible appeal. Leon, let's start with the incident itself. Remind us of the who, what, when, why, and all of
that. In the springtime, in the Midway District in the city, there was a 911 call. San Diego Police Officer Neil Browder responded to a call of a gentleman who was wielding a knife. He showed up on the scene and very shortly afterwards shot and killed 42-year-old Ferdun Rashan Nahad. Turns out that Nahad was not carrying a knife, and it was actually a pen. And so there was a number of other questions. Browder did not turn on his body camera, and so almost immediately there were questions about the shooting.
Okay. And the folks who, just for the record, who made the call, was he in a store or business?
Yeah, it was an adult bookstore, and the shooting took place in the alley outside.
And he was acting crazy, and these folks were scared, and they said that
was the allegation on the 911 call.
All right, very good. Now, the video that is in question here, right. Where did that video come from?
That's a surveillance camera that captured the incident from a nearby business shooting into the alleyway where the shooting took place.
Okay, and it's on private property, and
correct.
But the police have and the district attorney have kept this under wraps. In fact, the family of the victim here had to sue to get it, right?
Right. So this is pretty interesting. So yes, the police came in and asked the business for the footage. The business gave it to them, and the business has not released it to anybody else. Since then, the police have considered it as evidence, and so as a result, would not release it to anyone else. The family, I did an interview with Nahad's family members that published this week, in which they asked to see it, and the cops told them the only way you're going to get to see it is if you sue. And so that's what they decided to do.
All right. Now, I've got a comment here from SDPD Chief Shelley Zimmerman. Here's what she said in her declaration. I'll read this. I'm concerned that the release of evidence will inflame violent or unstable elements leading to threats and violence in San Diego, particularly against Officer Browder and his family. So that was her concern there. What in this hearing before the federal judge now, did he address that concern or other concerns along those lines?
Sure, and just to back up for a second, it's a bit interesting. The district attorney decided not to prosecute Officer Browder in the shooting, and she cited the video saying, A, that the video was not great quality, was too far away to tell anything, and B, she said even what we did see, it was fine. It backed up the officer's story. So for her to say that, and then Zimmerman to say this is so bad that if the public sees it, it might cause riots, is a bit of a discrepancy there.
What do you think about that, J.W.?
Knee-jerk reaction, I think, trying to... And this wasn't even shot by the cops. This was a private citizen.
Right.
That's right.
What's going on? What are we going to do with police video that's shot by the officers if they're doing this over video shot by his private enterprise?
Well, that does bring up the issue we talked about. The officer has a body camera.
Right. In this case, did not turn it on. But.
Yeah. And what's the situation with that? Did that raise some questions? You alluded to that earlier.
Sure. So it did raise questions. The police chief did change policy to require officers to turn their cameras on prior to engaging in an incident rather than when they're at the incident. So that has changed, but it is unclear, given that the policy was changed, whether the officer violated any policies at all.
We're there. Okay, let's talk about the judge here. I should say, sure. Voice of San Diego, KPBS, 10 News, iNews Source, all went to court,
right.
And not directly, but as a result of us pushing this hearing came, and again, it was a federal judge, Judge Hayes, and he said it must be clear that further publicity unchecked would so distort the views of potential jurors that 12 could not be found who would, under proper instructions, fulfill their sworn duty to render a just verdict exclusively on the evidence presented in open court. There's no evidence to suggest the public dissemination of the information from this case, currently limited by this protective order, would meet that standard. In other words, let's release this video. He's not agreeing with the police chief and the DA.
So particularly after the DA decided to not prosecute, there was less and less of a reason to sort of keep this under wraps. The officer said, hey, there's still an internal investigation, the civil suit, and the judge said it's just not real.
It comes to the heart of this thing where they will argue, hey, you're going to taint the jury pool. That has never happened with media coverage.
Right.
They continually bring this up. The city attorney argued that before the judge, didn't he? And I'm thinking, come on, man. That's no reason to do that. And the other argument the guy was doing that was that
Internal.
What was the other?
The internal investigation.
Yeah, right. And interfere with an internal investigation, which was already done.
Yeah,
well, the internal investigation has not yet been completed, but what was interesting about that is they argued, well, there could be political pressure on the internal investigation. And to me, if your internal investigation could be tainted by political pressure, then what does it say about the integrity of San Diego Police's internal investigation?
Right.
If the mayor could order, or the council person could order that to do something else, that raises much bigger questions than a video.
Right. All right,
I'm also
go ahead.
curious,
Yeah.
why does the family, which is in possession, right,
Sure.
of the video, how can they not be permitted to hand it over to the press?
Right, that's a very good question. And so, again, we're not what we asked in this court hearing was not to ask the government to give it to us. We asked the family to be allowed to release it to us. And the reason why they can't do it right now is in order for them to have gotten a copy of the video in the first place, the city said you have to agree to keep it secret. And so, in order to turn it over,
legit?
that was a protective order that was put in place with,
and that's
with
what the judges
and that's what the
overturned.
judges ultimately overturned.
So let's hear from the attorney, KPBS, and the other news organizations I mentioned. Attorney Guylan Cummins, she was outside the courtroom. Here's what she had to say in response to the judge's ruling.
You know, the First Amendment has long said that the public needs to hear about crime as the process unfolds and court proceedings as they unfold. There has never been a rule that the press cannot report on either crime or the criminal justice system because the prosecution wants an absolutely pristine, set of witnesses. In fact, I've just never seen a case like that ever.
All right, and that kind of goes back to what JW, the point he was making. So you have, Liam, you've interviewed a man who repeatedly viewed that video because he was connected with the company that had the surveillance camera there. What does he say it shows?
He said the video shows that the shooting was unprovoked. He said that the video is shocking. He said the video shows Nahad, yes, walking towards the officer when the officer first arrives, but the emergency lights are not on in the police car. But he said as the shooting gets closer, Nahad is slowing down and may have even stopped prior to the shooting occurring. And so to him, it was an unprovoked thing, and something that was shocking to him to view it.
It's why you want to see this, certainly. Now, we should say that there was some concern by the family. This fella had a history of some violence and a restraining order previous to this event. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, this is complicated, but he certainly was mentally ill. He's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he would go on long states, many month states, where he was having manic incidents. That is what is happening. What was happening the night of this incident, and some of his past behavior during these states was violent to people who loved him.
Did the police know that when they approached him, or did?
I mean, it's hard to say that. I mean, I can't imagine. Well, I don't know. But it's certainly difficult to imagine that unless Browder had interacted with him before, which is certainly a possibility that this gentleman was having mental health concerns.
And I should note, and germane to our next segment, we're going to talk about continue on the police topic. Is police officers go out and in a society like ours, awash in guns. Nobody's saying this isn't a dangerous job. You don't know what you're seeing out there in the dark. Unlike what we saw from the fear on the Republican candidates the other night. Terrorism isn't a great thing a cop worries about. He worries about somebody, a nut with a gun on the streets.
And it is certainly fair to the officer to say he got a call saying there was a guy threatening people with a knife. I mean, the fact turned out not to be a knife, and whether he should have recognized that when he got there is a different question. But yes, he certainly reasonable for him to go in expecting someone he was going to encounter had a deadly weapon.
Right. All right. Well, we are going to segue now into another police-related topic. Many San Diegans may not realize it, but for more than 25 years, the city has had a citizens review board in place, supposedly monitoring the police. The purpose, to hold officers accountable for misconduct and to protect police themselves from unfair discipline. But JW interviewed a pair of longtime members of this board, volunteer members of this board, and they had some disturbing things to say.
Right. And going off the top, what you said, a lot of people don't know about the Citizens Review Board, and I think that's part of the problem. I mean, they are the watchdog of the San Diego Police Department, the only watchdog that we have in this city. These two ladies both worked for the board for a long time.
6 and 7 years, right? Several years.
And very bright, intelligent people, asked questions. Seemed to upset the city attorney who is in those board meetings, who works for the city of San Diego. And they said they would stir the pot, ask questions. They seem to be upset. They're the mayor has the right to not reappoint them. They're on a committee. There's only been 3 women, I've talked to all 3 of them, who have never 3 people have never been reappointed to the board, and these 3 women, and all 3 women have one thing in common. They ask tough questions.
And they say that's the reason they don't want them back on there, because
they're troublemakers.
They're not keen on having tough questions
Right.
asked.
They said a lot of other serious things, but I mean, big picture, yeah, they ask too many questions.
All right, well, give us some background on this board itself, this review board. Who runs it, and how do they get their cases for review?
You remember the Saigon Pen case with the young black guy? Right.
Yeah.
It was a big deal in town. It led to...
we should, now that you've raised it, this was a black fellow who wound up...
in a driveway, wrestling with the cop, took the cop's gun away, shot him. Yeah. The city was on edge.
Exactly.
Eventually, it led to a vote, and they voted the creation of this Citizens Review Board. There are similar organizations across the United States.
And in the county of San Diego.
Right. And at that time, the manager, it was a city manager government, so the city manager was the head of it. Now it's the mayor. The mayor is the head of it. He appoints people to sit on the board. He has final say on it and tiebreakers. And what they basically do is they review internal affairs reports. Now, it's sworn to confidentiality. These women honored that. Even when I was bugging them a little bit, I said, no, we're not going to talk about the cases.
So they're like grand jurors. They don't reveal what goes on. Now, you say the mayor, but he operates it in terms of appointing the members. It's actually the city attorney who's in the trenches doing the nuts and bolt cases,
correct,
right?
Right.
And now some folks have said, critics have said, the oversight by the city attorney's office, that's an obvious conflict, because the city attorney is representing these police officers in controversial cases.
I mean, if there's a lawsuit, who goes to court to keep the tape from being shown? It's a city attorney. Wait a minute, who's advising these citizens about behavior of police officers? Oh, it's a city attorney. We interviewed an attorney who's an expert on ethical issues, and he said it's clearly a conflict to have the city attorney wearing 2 hats.
So that was, and that attorney was Ed McIntyre.
Ed McIntyre, right. Longtime attorney, respected, and he reviewed all the materials. We provided him everything we had, and he said, the attorney is conflicted. He is conflicted, the city attorney.
Now, the city attorney's office, what do they have to say about this issue of conflict?
They were very excited about this story.
I'll bet they were excited about it.
Basically, they said, we have a wall, and this city attorney doesn't know that we have this case over here with this maybe a wrongful shooting by a cop that's going to cost the city $20 zillion. Well, they never talk about this. And I kind of find that hard to believe. Not that they're not ethical people, but there's got to be some pressure. Plus, the executive director of the board, who is supposed to do things like scheduling, is also a city employee. And her role has increased in power since Faulkner came in office.
Is it common for in other cities with police review boards for, say, a loudmouth member to not be reappointed or be ousted? Is that how it typically works?
I have never heard of that happening before, but I don't know about every single city, every single board in the United States.
Lee?
2 points here. I think there's a real debate going on right now, and I wish it were a bigger one, about what the future of this Citizens Review Board is going to be. The county model, which is something that people in the city are pushing for, is much stronger. It allows for independent subpoena power, which the city does not have, and would allow for a more stronger and more robust oversight capability. Second, you folks did another good story this week on police accountability about how police officers were not getting and commanders were not getting training, including the chief herself. And what was interesting about that, beyond sort of what occurred, is that they fought you guys very, very hard for the release of that public information. And so we have a thing with this video, we have a thing with what you guys have uncovered, and a number of the reporting that we and other organizations have done over the last 2 years, especially since Zimmerman has come in office. And she has worked very, very hard to keep information from the public about how the department is doing its duties, something that she was elected to, or not elected, was appointed to fix.
Because there was a big controversy over officer misconduct at that time. Let me, before we come to your point, I'll come right back to you. We do have a bite from Councilman Todd Gloria, who's calling for reform of the review board. Let's hear what he has to say.
Some of the things that stood out to me was the ability to subpoena information and individuals to come before their groups. They have a more direct access, I think, to information. And, the county does that. They seem to be comfortable with it. We don't have that at the city.
All right, and he's talking about the county review
Right.
board, a separate board.
Which
there.
I don't agree with. I appreciate him being on board on this issue, but I don't think CLRB is the end-all answer to this.
CLRB, again, being the
county
county's...
and his staff is meeting with those women this week, and maybe today, I think, to talk about them. And his staff is at least making the effort to find out what's going on. Up to this point, the idea of reforming this board has been ping-pong between the Charter Review Committee, because it's a charter... it was chartered by the voters, and the Public Safety Committee. Public Safety Committee looked at it, sent it back to the Charter Review. Charter Review looked at it. Now it's somewhere in limbo. So if there wasn't somebody like Todd Gloria asking, "Oh, maybe we should be looking at this," it would sit there for even longer.
All right, we got about a minute left. I did want to ask you, you had asked them for 2 years worth of cases, and you wanted to review them because they're supposed to come up with the reports. At some point, their work becomes
Look at their
public.
website. It's out of date. There's no information. One of their goals was to update the website and provide the information to the public. It's not there. And we asked them under the California Public Records Act, okay, how many cases, how many was sent to, how many officers were disciplined. We didn't ask their names and, details on what they're doing because it's not out there and it should be.
Yeah, where's a report? I mean, some conclusion. They do some work and they do meetings.
Right,
obviously.
right. And it's just, I think it's all part of the issues with the culture.
Okay.
With that
Do you think we'll see anything in terms of reform with Todd Gloria and anyone else?
Hopefully. I heard the story had some traction over at the city council and that they may get it. I did talk to the police union. Are they planning to provide a counter proposal? And they said they're not. They're going to sit and watch what happens.
Okay. Well, we'll watch for some more reports as we do move forward. That does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Ingrid Lobet of iNews Source, J.W. August of NBC7 San Diego, and Liam Dillon of Voice of San Diego. A reminder, all of the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. And a programming note, we're off next week. Enjoy your holiday, but please join us again on New Year's Day for a special edition. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.